All right, Eric. Thanks everybody for joining me. This is Mike. It's raining right now, so I have a tin roof out here in my little shed. This little shed is only 12 by 15, but it's surprisingly put together pretty well. So anyway. So I got another one from way back. G'day, way back. This is the story of the dish and Apollo 11. So I just read the description, and it's going to have something to do with a radio receiver tower out in the, they call it a sheep paddock up in outback Australia. So that's more than likely is how the, during certain parts of the flight of the Apollo, that's where they would have been able to receive signals from the Apollo 11. That's my layman's understanding of it. So this ought to be interesting, y'all. And thanks for showing up. And let's get into it and see how this goes. If the rain gets too heavy, y'all hear that? If it gets too heavy, I'll probably mute the microphone until I need to say something. But just enjoy it for right now, because I am. So here we go, y'all.
Neil Armstrong descended the ladder of the lunar module Eagle on 21st of July 1969. The images were broadcast live to more than 500 million people around the globe. Most Australians watching the event were unaware of just how big a role their country played in getting those images back to Earth. In 2000, the Australian-made film The Dish, starring Sam Neill, Kevin Harrington and Tom Long, brought Australia's contribution to Apollo into the public eye. While the movie is based on real events at the Parkes Radio Telescope in New South Wales, it deviated from history for dramatic effect. Before the movie came out, no one had ever played cricket in The Dish. The Dish was a huge success at home, brilliantly capturing the unique Australian character and way of life.
You just bullshitted NASA.
Though the film wasn't quite as successful in the United States. I wonder why. Early in the film, it is established that there are tensions between the Parkes technicians and NASA representatives. It seems as though NASA don't trust backward Australians to do the job properly, and the Aussies resent having NASA breathing down their necks. These tensions never existed during the Apollo missions, though there is some truth to them. In the early days, NASA had indeed sent the Australians coordinates that had not been corrected for the Southern Hemisphere. But with space tracking stations in Carnarvon, Woomera, Honeysuckle Creek and Tidbinbilla, NASA and Australian scientists had established a happy working relationship. Parkes had previously received the signals from the earlier Mariner 4 mission to Mars. When NASA released the results to the public and to the scientific community, they made no mention of Parkes' involvement, an oversight that angered Parkes staff and made them reluctant to work with NASA in the future. But Apollo was different. It was putting a man on the moon, and lives were at stake. Playing such a critical role in the first moon landing, every important system at Parkes was backed up. In case of a power failure, backup diesel generators were ready to kick in to power the dish. In the movie, one of the Parkes technicians fails to properly prime the generators, and Parkes loses its signal, and the Apollo spacecraft. In reality, this could never have happened. John Bolton, the director of Parkes and the inspiration for Sam Neill's character, backed up even the backup systems. In the event of a power failure and failure of the diesel generators, NASA's receivers at the top of the dish would run off battery power. To keep the 1,000-ton dish moving, teams of men were to be sent up to crank the dish by hand. Bolton actually tested this, sending his biggest and strongest PhD students up into the dish to crank it as fast as they could. They were able to crank it fast enough that, if necessary, they could have tracked the spacecraft on its way to the moon. Originally, Parkes had been slated as the backup receiver, with NASA's own dish at Goldstone in California as the primary. After Apollo 10, which had been a dress rehearsal for the final Apollo 11 landing, NASA had decided that the crew would need to rest after the effort of the challenging landing. The delay upgraded Parkes from backup to primary receiver. On the 20th of July 1969, after handling computer alarms, navigating boulder-strewn landing fields, and with only 30 seconds of fuel remaining, the Eagle touched down in the Sea of Tranquility.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Flushed with adrenaline, there was no way Armstrong and Aldrin were going to rest, and they started to prepare for their moonwalk. Suddenly, Goldstone became the primary tracking station, and the moonwalk would be over before the moon rose above Australia. However, the process of donning the spacesuits in a cramped space capsule in low gravity and venting the atmosphere from the lunar module took a lot longer than expected. By the time Armstrong was ready to climb out of the hatch, the moon had risen in the sky above Parkes, but it was too low on the horizon. Parkes' huge 64-metre dish can only tip 60 degrees off the vertical, not low enough to point directly at the moon, but Parkes was still able to receive a weak signal. For the first few minutes of the broadcast, the smaller tracking station at Honeysuckle Creek was receiving a better picture, and captured Armstrong's first step onto the lunar surface.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
After 6 minutes, the moon had risen high enough that Parkes was getting a better signal, and NASA switched to the Parkes feed for the remainder of the moonwalk. But at Parkes, the team were too busy to watch the broadcast. The final crisis in the movie is the weather, and this problem is absolutely true. The site of the Parkes dish had been selected for its generally calm winds, but on the day of Armstrong and Aldrin's moonwalk, the telescope was hit with gusts exceeding 100 kilometres per hour, the strongest recorded at the site at the time, and well above the telescope's design limits. The huge dish sits on rails at the top of the control tower, and is anchored only by its own immense weight. When the wind gets too strong, the dish needs to be pointed vertically to reduce its drag and prevent damage. Not wanting to lose this historic opportunity, John Bolton ordered his team to keep tracking the moon. Ignoring blaring wind alarms, a rumbling telescope, and gusts that shook the entire control tower, the technicians kept their eye on the strain gauges and kept the dish on target. The strong winds continued throughout the day, but the Parkes team kept their telescope operating, and after 5 hours of reception, the moonwalk was over and the TV cameras shut down. Following the success of Apollo 11, Parkes was to play a role in every subsequent Apollo mission, except for Apollo 13. For the Apollo 13 mission, the moon was going to be too low on the horizon for Parkes to get a good signal, so the telescope had been returned to scientific work in the meantime. Until, that is, Apollo 13's service module exploded.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we've had a problem.
Famously, the crew of Apollo 13 used the lunar module as a lifeboat. However, the lunar module was designed to operate for only a few days on the moon with 2 astronauts, not sustain a crew of 3 for a week. To conserve power, the radio transmitter on the spacecraft broadcast a signal 1,000 times weaker than normal. The huge dish at Parkes was needed to pick up this faint signal. After hearing of the accident, John Bolton directed his team to start prepping the dish to track Apollo 13, before NASA had even called them for help. The NASA receivers had been removed while the telescope was in science mode. To speed up the reconfiguration, Bolton had teams of scientists and technicians taking NASA equipment up in the service lift, while other teams manually carried scientific equipment down the access ladder. The reconfiguration, which normally took days, was completed in only a few hours, and NASA technicians arrived to find the telescope almost ready to go. In spite of Parkes' huge size and great sensitivity, the signal from Apollo 13 was so weak that the automatic tracking computer wasn't able to keep a lock on the spacecraft. Technicians had to manually adjust the dish to keep the faint signal flowing back to Houston. This was an immensely difficult task, and the technicians took it in turns to guide the dish, swapping out roughly every 20 minutes, exhausted from the effort. Parkes kept critical information flowing to NASA during the emergency and helped to get the crew of Apollo 13 safely back to Earth. Since Apollo, Parkes has only supported a small number of space missions, including Giotto, Galileo and Cassini. Australia has a long history of supporting space communications, hosting and operating ground stations for NASA, the European Space Agency, the Japanese Space Agency JAXA, and the Swedish Space Corporation. With a brand new Australian Space Agency, NASA's plans to return to the Moon, and the dawning of the commercial space age, it will be exciting to see what role Australia plays in humanity's future in space.
Yeah, pretty interesting. You know, these are all things that I didn't have a clue. I didn't know. I think in the back of my mind, I might have heard of, that another country, I'm not sure it was Australia that in my mind, had a, because of the curvature of the Earth and the location of the moon as the Earth is spinning, I knew another country had to do the communications at certain times of the day or night. I didn't realize to what extent, and I didn't realize how sticking big this antenna is either, where they actually have a service lift to go up, to change that thing at the apex, I guess, of that antenna. Just the engineering alone to get that thing even round boggles my mind. How man in the 60s with no computers could figure out how to to do everything that they've done for the moon landings and all the Apollo things. And once again, man, just shows you how much Australia is interconnected with America, and I'm glad of it. And I'm sure there's some Apollo 13 astronauts that are glad that they had that caliber of intelligence sitting there in Australia, helping them get back to the United States. Okay, so thanks for everybody for stopping by. Thanks, Greg, for the request. Everybody, if you don't mind, hit the like and subscribe button. Leave a comment if you prefer. And all that helps the algorithm and helps get this out to more people. All right, man. So till I see y'all again, I'll catch you on down the road. Let's go to the outro, and I got another one right around the corner, y'all. Take it easy, and I'll see you later.